A legendary and remarkable career spanning more than 75 years. After earning her bachelor's and master's degrees at Louisiana State University in 1933 and 1935, Ms. Berkett first enrolled in LSU's law school, but soon transferred to Tulane Law School. Her outspoken opposition to the regime of Huey P. Long, first as governor and then as senator, subjected her to surveillance and to hostility and harassment that made remaining in Baton Rouge increasingly less tenable. Looking back at a 1999 interview, Ms. Berkett called her decision to transfer to Tulane the smartest thing I ever did. After graduating first in her class from Tulane in 1937, Ms. Berkett entered a job market in which no woman ever had been hired by a law firm anywhere in the state of Louisiana. At the time of Ms. Berkett's law school graduation, Sandra Day O'Connor, who herself would famously later be turned away by more than 40 law firms and proved herself unable to find a job at a private law firm after graduating from Stanford Law School, was still in the first grade. Undaunted, Ms. Berkett pressed her own case and was hired as an associate by the leading New Orleans law firm of Deutsch & Kerrigan, now Deutsch, Kerrigan & Stiles, becoming the first woman ever to practice law with a firm in Louisiana. At the same time, Ms. Berkett continued her activism against the Long regime. With other classmates from the class of '37, she founded the People's League, a grassroots civic organization committed to exposing corruption in New Orleans and Louisiana government. And in the ensuing decades, Ms. Berkett built a reputation as one of the finest and most respected lawyers in the American South. Judge Alvin Rubin, who succeeded our own Judge John Minor Wisdom on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, wrote of Ms. Berkett, "Her achievements as a trial lawyer are legendary. Beginning at a time when there were few, if any, women trial lawyers in the United States, she tried lawsuits with superb ability, skill, intelligence, and strategy, yielding no ground to any opponent." And I can say I have heard the same assessment by many of Ms. Berkett's former opponents as well. Ms. Berkett celebrated her 100th birthday earlier this spring in March. She retired from law practice only a couple of years ago and still maintained office at the firm where she remains of counsel. She has won a raft of honors throughout her career, in the past month alone adding the Louisiana State Bar Association's Lifetime Achievement Award and having been inducted into the inaugural class of our own Tulane Law School Hall of Fame. As one who graduated from law school at a time of enormous uncertainty in the throes of the Great Depression, with the prospect of war looming on the horizon, in a state where no woman had yet been hired as a lawyer by a firm, Ms. Berkett went on to build a path-breaking career of tremendous accomplishment and impact, and it is a great honor to welcome her back to Tulane Law School.
I'm going to be a little out of order. I'm going to, before I thank the Dean for all that wonderful stuff he said about me, I want to address the graduates. That's why we're here. And I want to congratulate every one of them for having made the grade and to wish them the greatest success to follow, and that we'll have a new group of really thoroughly trained and conscientious lawyers to look at and hear from. Dean Meyer, I want to thank for all those wonderful things he said about me. I think that you should not be too surprised if I don't measure up. And, but I want to say that when Dean Meyer asked me to speak today, I thought, what meaningful and relevant message can a centenarian convey to a class of 2013? And I tried to remember what was said to my class of 37. That's 1937. And we graduated from the Tulane Law School. And I can tell you, I cannot remember a single word. And even who said it. But I am firm in my conviction that that speaker that day did not outline or suggest to us any of the actions and any of the projects that we, the class of 37, chose to carry us through and out of the Great Depression. They were our own solutions, and they worked for us. So today I'm going to tell you what we did. Not because you should do the same thing, because it is and has a relevance if it does nothing more than demonstrate to you that with ingenuity and determination, you too can successfully survive a catastrophic economy. I'm telling the story. I personally am telling the story because I'm the last and only member of the class of 37 who's still alive. I don't know if you're clapping for me or the fact that I can live that long. I don't know. How we faced the same, the Great Depression and emerged to produce a group of highly respected and successful lawyers will, I hope, give you some optimism and maybe even some ideas as to how you can struggle with your prospects and your own problems. What I offer is a solution, is our solution, adapted to time and place. And you must devise your own solutions. First, let me tell you who we were. We numbered only about slightly over 45 students. As compared to this, of course, there isn't any comparison. But we were 45 talented young minds who had chosen to enter law school shortly after the great stock market crash, and that started the Great Depression. And choosing to enter law school then demonstrated either that we were reckless or brave. And I leave you, after I told you our history in the end, to determine which we were. We graduated shortly after most of the banks in this country had been closed and many never reopened. And so in the May of '37, hiring throughout the country, not just law firms, but any business, and everywhere. Only about a dozen of us were hired for existing law firms, but at minuscule salaries. The largest salary was $125 a month. And even if you adjust for inflation over 36 years, $125 a month was not a viable wage. Those who were not hired took whatever they could find, and that included work that did not require 3 solid years of law school and law school training. They adjusted things like claims. They did secretarial work, and some brave ones set up their shingles. As the months rolled by, however, a small group of us became completely aware of the fact that all we had to do was to look about us and we could see corruption, no indictments. And we decided that if economic recovery were to come to the country, it might not seep through all that corruption and come back to Louisiana. And so we decided maybe we ought to do something about that. And we formed a small group that we called the People's League. And we decided we would use our professional training to clean up the corruption. Now, is that reckless or brave? We had youthful confidence and extra time, and so we set out with an ambitious agenda. We had no money, and nobody was funding us. Nobody knew we existed until we took time to make our existence known and to tell the public why we were formed. And that's where we were fortunate. We had generous support from the press, particularly what was known then as the New Orleans item. We courted the press and we used it as much as we could. We had stories in the newspaper almost every day. And we announced each committee we were organizing and creating. And oh my God, did we have committees? We had more committees than we had people. And in each instance, we set out the names of everybody who was serving on the committee and what we intended to do. And it was important, we later found out, to identify the names. So we found that soon people found all that information we were feeding out very interesting. They were starved for good news. And so they built a small audience. And our first project was to find out why no action had been taken or was being taken to abate the obvious fraud and criminal activity that was so rampant in our area. Well, we began with a detailed review of how the grand jury was actually being selected. it officially started with a random selection of 144 names drawn from a fishbowl and presented to the judge, who was to select from the 144 names the grand jury. We went to the courthouse to watch this process, and I can vividly remember our amazement when the clerk thrust his hand into that fishbowl and with one swoop came out exactly 144 names. We checked the 144 names through a credit agency, and we had the audacity to give our findings to the court because we thought he needed it. Well, our findings did not seem to enforce the court's selection, but we found no other evidence that aroused our suspicion regarding the judge's selection. So then we went looking where we should have looked in the first place, the grand jury and the district attorney. And we found what we thought we'd find. The district attorney was presenting the jurors with nothing, absolutely nothing. Well, this was a brand new grand jury. And they became aware of our interests, and they stimulated their own group. And they decided that they were going to prepare a written report to the court describing how inadequate the district attorney was. And they were going to present it in open court to the judge so that it would get publication. We learned of the plan and realized that it might meet resistance, and indeed it did. And that was the explosive part. When the spokesman stood up to present the judge with the grand jury report, the judge immediately ordered him to resist immediately, whereupon the juror who was presenting the report tossed it over to the side where it was conveniently caught by a news reporter who was standing there as planned. And so the report was due for publication. And just as quickly as the report was thrown, the judge put the grand jury in jail. Well, that was at that point that the People's League hit its stride. We immediately came to the aid of the jail jurors and at the same time took steps to enforce the removal of the district attorney. And to gather support for the jail jurors and for the dismissal of the district attorney, we called for a public protest. And the member of the league chosen as our speaker at the protest was T. Hale Boggs, who was a member of our class and a member of the league. Hale made his first political speech that day on the steps of the criminal courts building on Tulane Avenue. And it proved to be a highly effective speech in many ways. In the first place, it brought us an additional membership and much needed funds. And very soon after his maiden speech, Hale, who was politically unknown at the time before he made his speech, announced his candidacy for the United States House of Representatives and was elected on the basis of his presentation. Some of you may remember that T. Hale Boggs went on years later to become the majority leader of the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, to go back to the poor jurors who were in jail and the DA, we used our skills as lawyers and took appropriate legal action through the courts and up to the Louisiana Supreme Court to defend the jurors, and we did gain their complete release. At the same time, we filed formal administrative complaints against the DA, and those eventuated in his dismissal from office by the Attorney General of Louisiana. Our successes in these, our initial projects, established us as potent advocates, and we were encouraged to take on additional products, and we did. Among others, we took aim at Mayor Maestri of New Orleans and his regime. We played a part in defeating Earl Long's candidacy for governor of Louisiana, and we actively participated in the writing, formulating, and the act of passing the Louisiana State Civil Service. Now, some of the activities of the People's League have been reported by the writers of that period. Harnett Kane, for example, has us in his book, and a few members of the League have left their files in a video to document some of the work that we did. And those are in the Tulane School library. Now, the People's League came to an abrupt end with Pearl Harbor. And so did the Great Depression. Those are the People's League's members who did survive the war and who did come back to Louisiana and a thriving economy after the war, did not reorganize the People's League. And most of them continued an active interest in community affairs and enjoyed successful legal practices. Now, I didn't start out to make this appeal to my class or even to the League, although they have both been praised and deserved. My intention is to show you that even when you live in the shadow of a failed economy, you have civic and professional opportunities that can legitimately also serve your personal ambitions as well as the needs of your community. What I've recounted so far were the civic successes and accomplishments, but just as important, in some respects more enduring, were the professional opportunities our individual participations earned for each of us. When we actively participated in the League, it introduced us to our neighbors who were, and for the most part, very thankful for our services. And when the economy improved, some of those neighbors needed lawyers. and they remembered our names and our accomplishments. And they came back to us, of course, and we built sizable and successful law practices. And in the beginning, there were those of us who had no opportunity to practice what they had learned in law school. They didn't have any clients. And so what we offered them was a chance to hone their skills at a time when they might never have had that opportunity. And so it was that to free the grand jurors, for example, they went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Louisiana. And that's unusual at an early stage. And it's unusual sometimes even for able lawyers today to get before the Louisiana Supreme Court. And our activities involved in the other aspects of our program involved going to other courts in Louisiana, to the United States District Court of the Eastern District of Louisiana, and we even went to the halls of the legislature. So that was an opportunity that measured considerably on the value of our civic activities. Now, I realize that the class of 2013 may have many more graduates than 42. I can see that. And that you intend to practice in diverse political areas. The message I bring from the People's League is still a viable one. From the depths of the Great Depression, we were able to survive and establish successful legal practices. It can be done. It will require your ingenuity, your determination, whether you attack your problems as a group or each with a plan of his own. So be brave. Good luck.
Marian, I thank you so much for honoring us with your remarks and honoring us with the example of your courage and leadership. You set the bar very high for all of us who follow in your footsteps. Thank you. I've been to your home, and I have seen in your break front that you really have no more room for anything like this. Because it is filled with honors that you have collected. But I cannot let the occasion go without offering a token of our deep affection and respect and gratitude for everything that you do for us today and always for Tulane Law School. Thank you very much.